Hey guys, it's been a while. I thought I would make another change to the channel again. Well, change going back to the way it was basically, where I do shorter clips talking and analyzing about geopolitical events instead of doing the longer videos because, well, having two jobs and doing this is quite difficult. So therefore, I think it's better that I go back to the way things were, basically. So a lot of things have been going on. The counteroffensive by Ukraine, which has gone on for more than about a month, I believe, has been a total disaster, right? The Ukrainians have taken horrendous losses. They haven't even broken through the first line of Russian defenses. Even the CNN here, we're going to talk about Erdogan and Ukraine and Russia as well. Um, Not this one, but we'll go to this one. There you go. It says here, the offensive, this is by Miley, the Ukrainians were pushing ahead. The offensive is advancing steadily, which is a lie, deliberately working its way through very difficult minefields. There are a lot of minefields, heavily mined. 500 meters a day, 1,000 meters a day, 2,000 meters a day, that kind of thing, he said. I respectfully disagree that they are making a lot of progress. Sure, they can take over a village here, a small road here and there, but the problem is once they've taken over it, the Russians will bombard it with a lot of artillery. You have to remember, artillery is like the main shit in this war, right? Along with the Russian Air Force, because Ukraine doesn't have much of an Air Force left, and they definitely don't have any air defenses left. The Russians destroyed those. And we've seen the pictures of the Leopards delivered from Finland, from Germany, as well as the Bradleys from the United States. We have seen the graveyards of these tanks and this equipment it's just burnt out, right? And this goes to show that Western equipment isn't as superior as they claim it to be. It's frankly garbage. A lot of it is just over technological gadgets. And the problem here is that we've spoken about the Ukrainian army and the soldiers before. They are used to Soviet equipment, and training them with Western equipment is time consuming, and there's just not enough time. I mean, they are kidnapping people off the streets, giving them a little bit of training, a few weeks perhaps, if even that, put them in a Bradley and just leave them there for to die, basically. I mean, it's insane. Here you go. I thought we read through here. Here we can start here. The CNN. The minefields in southern Ukraine are so dense, the troops trying to liberate the area can only advance tree by tree. One soldier involved in Kiev's counteroffensive in the south told CNN, in all his years of service, he said he's never seen this many mines. Well, no shit. I mean, the Ukrainians have a bad habit of always announcing what they're going to do. They've been talking about this counteroffensive for months ahead. And later down the article, they actually talked about that the Russians had been prepared for the Ukrainian counteroffensive for quite some time ahead. Of course they did, because Zelensky announced it. And the only thing that Ukraine has really is media optics. And we spoke about how the Ukrainians, sure, they can advance a little bit. Sorry about that. They can advance a little bit here. They can advance a little bit there. But the Russians are not stuck on a media narrative where they have announced that they must take this amount of territory or that amount of territory. They fight a war of attrition. They don't have this hyper focus on territory. They're willing to give up territory in order to save the lives of their soldiers, because you can always regain territory. But Ukraine is dead set on taking territory, maintaining it no matter the cost, and it's just crazy. I mean, we saw that in Bakhmut, Operation Meat Grinder, right? Where the Ukrainians were just pouring in soldiers like crazy and equipment, and thousands of Ukrainian soldiers were killed. I mean, the death ratio, the kill ratio here is like 10-1. So for every Russian soldier, 10 Ukrainian soldiers die. And General Zaluzhny, which have been kind of sidelined, even received the blame for like Nord Stream 2 bombing. If we go here, perhaps, even he is complaining. Ukraine's top general says the expected mission is not feasible at all with just the weapons his army has now. So Ukraine has fended off Russia's advances for more than 16 months, and it's now several weeks into its long-awaited counteroffensive. The pace is grinding in some sectors of the front, but Kiev's top general says he doesn't want to hear complaints it's going too slow. General Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of armed forces, told the Washington Post that it pisses him off to hear commentary that his counteroffensive operations are moving slower than anticipated. Kiev's military is currently undergoing several offensive maneuvers along the front lines in the eastern and southern regions, and has made small but at times costly territorial gains in the process. Liberating Russian-occupied land, as he calls it, means, or the Business Insider calls it, means clearing obstacle fortifications, including anti-tank ditches, dragon's teeth, anti-vehicle barricades, minefields, and trench labyrinths, and breaking through Moscow's layered defensive lines. Breaching these many obstacles are dangerous and painstaking operations, especially since Ukraine doesn't appear to have all the capabilities that other militaries executing this kind of mission would normally employ. So, I'm not going to read a whole article, but you get the picture. It's not looking too good. And Russian President Vladimir Putin has also talked about it. According to Marcus Reisner, more intense fighting should be expected before the NATO summit in Vilnius. This NATO summit was a complete flop. Ukraine was once again dangled the opportunity to join NATO, officially at least, but it was snatched again away from it, right? And I believe it was George Soros who said that we should use Eastern Europeans as basically we should give them the promise that they can join NATO, at least some of them, right? And we should deliver them we should deliver them equipment and weapons, NATO equipment, in order to surround and threaten Russia. But we will never grant them this NATO membership. We will just always dangle it in front of them. So basically, they're going to use Eastern Europeans as proxies to fight the Russians. So yeah, I feel like history is kind of repeating itself. I mean, Nazi Germany did something similar. They allied themselves with various different fascistic movements and governments that surrounded the Soviet Union. And I think the Soviet Union faced up to like 200 plus armed divisions, while the Western Front had like 90, right? Correct me on that, but that's what I've heard. And yeah, we're seeing it again. I mean, NATO even they even brought in a lot of the Nazis in Operation Gladio after World War II. They cooperated with Stepan Bandera's organization for Ukrainian nationalists because his insurgent group uh, did continue its insurgency up until the 50s. Um, so NATO has a long history of supporting fascists and Nazis in order to surround and destroy Russia, or attempt to destroy Russia, rather. But anyway, once again, they're able to retake territories. The first phase of Ukraine's counteroffensive was a flop, prompting a subsequent change in tactics. Austrian colonel and military analyst Markus Reisner said in a conversation with the German television channel NTV on Monday. So yes, and even a lot of Western military analysts are admitting this. From my point of view, the first phase of the Ukrainian offensive has failed. Attempts were made to advance in mass, taking a page out of the U.S. Army playbook. That's basically what Russia did at the beginning of the war, pushing on with rapidly advancing tank columns. Then the Ukrainians realized that the Russians were too well prepared for such a breakthrough. They found themselves without the necessary support for a massive attack, Reisner said. Then the Ukrainian army changed tactics, he went on to say they're trying to advance in small assault groups. This tactic is very, very slow, but it brings success, the colonel believes. In his opinion, more intensive fighting should be expected ahead of the NATO summit in Vilnius, since the Ukrainian armed forces want to show once again that they are able to win back territories. I actually disagree with this statement right here. They're trying to advance in small groups and that it's bringing success. As far as I understood it, this tactic might be good if you're fighting insurgents groups in, let's say, I don't know, in some third world country, or a military that's perhaps not as strong. But with the Russian army, no way. I mean, it's a slaughterhouse, really. The Russian Defense Ministry said Ukrainian forces had been making unsuccessful attempts at a counteroffensive since June 4th. On June 22nd, Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev said that Ukrainian losses had exceeded 13,000 servicemen since the start of the counteroffensive. It's a huge number. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Ukrainian troops had no success in any area. Well, there you go. I think we should talk about perhaps Turkey. There's been a lot of talk about Turkey allowing Sweden in, and that they backstabbed Russia in releasing these Azov commanders that were held in Turkey, temporarily at least. And Russia took them away from the list of friendly nations or neutral nations, and they simply became another hostile country in a way. I never trusted Turkey. I think Turkey, I don't know why some people think that Turkey is some neutral country. Turkey and Erdogan has always played this double game. And the reason why they get away with this is because it's an important transit country. It sits between basically East and the West. And both the EU and Russia have economic ties. Of course, Turkey is part of NATO, so they have military relations with the country. And that's why, Turkey has shown this behavior on often, and I can just imagine that the leaders in Beijing and the Kremlin is they are in Moscow. They are extremely frustrated with Erdogan. He is not to be trusted, and of course, Russia will now, uh, because of this nonsense. Well, it's just not only because of this, but Russia sees no reason to why they should stick by the grain deal, and a lot of people are saying, well, it's going to alleviate food prices in the poorest nations, but the contrary. I mean, like the deal's stated goal, it just doesn't it doesn't follow up to the stated goal. The food is contrary going to European nations, so that's why it's getting terminated. And some final thoughts on all of this. Um, I live in Sweden, right? And there is a huge dosage of anti-Russian propaganda. There's a lot of pro-NATO sentiment going on. A lot of people have been pretty much scared to hysteria. Media does not put this war into a context. They just make it seem like Vladimir Putin, President Putin, just woke up one day, the 22nd of February in 2022, and just fuck it, I'm gonna invade Ukraine because they're assholes. No, they do not talk about the Maidan coup in 2014. They don't talk about the 8 years of shelling in the Donbass. They don't talk about the odious ideology of Stepan Bandera. They did actually talk about some of these things, about the Nazi problem in Ukraine prior to the Russian special military operation in February, right? But now they deem this as Russian propaganda, right? Um, the problem is if Sweden joins NATO, a lot of young men and women, but especially men, I guess, are going to be dragged into wars that's just none of our business. Sweden has never really been neutral, though. Let me just add that. Sweden have, since basically the 1950s, been working with the NATO bloc quietly. Um, Culturally, Sweden has always been kind of pro-American due to the CIA efforts to brainwash the population through a secret organization, or perhaps not so secret, but it's more of a front organization called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. There was a culture war in Sweden uh, between the Soviet Union and the United States on, winning the hearts and minds of the people. And eventually the United States won that culture war, and through the help of the Congress of Cultural Freedom. The Congress for Cultural Freedom was this liberal organization, cultural liberal organization that promoted postmodernism. It promoted basically the batshit insane stuff that we see in universities, and all this crazy stuff with the alphabet community and these things, right? They made sure to hire the cultural elites in Sweden, a lot of them, and put them in these in high positions in this organization. I think Wilhelm Moberg was part of this organization. There's actually a good documentary about this in P3 Dokumentär in Sweden, on Sveriges Radio, or Swedish radio, where they talk about basically the origins of this organization and the people in it, and all these things. So I would say that's the main reason to why Sweden is so heavily pro-American. It just festers throughout media apparatus and university and education system and so forth. And I mean, if you voice any sort of like critique against, Ukraine's military or political leadership, you're going to be ostracized. Sometimes you can even lose your job, depending on where you work at, right? And it's insanity. So they have managed to sort of create this boogeyman, which is Russia. And the population of Sweden has always been for quite some time, not always, but quite some time, it's been very docile and passive. Plus, they're brainwashed, so they pretty much went along with our politicians without even a single vote. Just throw us into NATO, right? The problem here is that, sure, Erdogan said yes to a NATO membership, but the backdrop of this is that Sweden has to still follow up on the demands that Turkey wants Sweden to reprehend or give them these Turkish opposition people as well as Kurdish activists, right? Whom have allegedly some ties with the PKK organization, which Turkey and even the United States and the European Union considers a terrorist organization, right? And here comes Turkey's, I guess, east-west swinging all the time. And one thing that probably pisses Erdogan off a lot is the American support for the Kurds in Syria, because a lot of these Kurds, they are the offshoot of PKK, and they pose a threat to Turkey. Nevertheless, the Syrian state, but nobody cares about that here in the West, at least, because, I mean, for over a decade, they've tried to overthrow the legitimate government of Syria. But that's a different conflict. That's why Erdogan has a point of contention with the West when it comes to, or partially at least, to East-West relations, or whatever we're gonna call it, right? So yes, although there is a invitation and it's been granted, there's still some demands that has to be met. So it's not even maybe sure yet, but I think sooner or later Sweden will become an official member of NATO. I mean, it's just a matter of time, basically. And I mean, Sweden have already participated in the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, an imperialist war, basically. The destruction of Libya through the what do you call it? The 1973 resolution of a no-fly zone, which they claimed was to protect civilians, but then they went after Muammar Gaddafi and eventually acted basically as air support for the Al-Qaeda rebels that killed him without a trial. And these are people that call themselves democracies and people that believe in the rule of law and all these things. The rest of the world is a jungle, as Joseph Borrell put it. Jungle Joseph, right? The EO commissioner. So, yeah. But yes, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to try and upload more frequently, shorter videos, and keep a somewhat more steady flow because I have a very busy schedule. But I appreciate it, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.